Let's get the second one then. Because this is, I mean, two of the same grapes, same producer. You're going to see the same hand in both of these wines, and maybe you'll see that they're similar in the way that they're developing.
And so this is Frontenac Rouge, Marche la Foch, Saint Croix, Léon Milo, and Sabrevois. A little bit more gamey, foxy on the nose. Which Marshall Foch in particular can be. Yeah. Soft tannins. I mean, a little bit of that foxy gaminess. You know, some decent fruit. I mean, juicy, fresh, drinkable. I'd say chill this down a little bit and.
Right now, it's probably, is it a room temperature?
I'd say it's probably just slightly below room temperature. But I think it can even be chilled down a couple more degrees, and it would just enhance that freshness. Because the tannins are quite soft. That's quite juicy. Interesting. I think it's very clear that this is made with hybrids simply because of the flavor profile. But I think they've done a pretty decent job with it.
Especially since you get like Marche la Foch is what a lot of the emerging regions kind of started with here. If it's not Nova Scotia, it's, I mean, even
in British Columbia they're still
Ontario.
using, and Ontario they're still using it. As the region emerges, as it becomes a more serious in terms of commercial production, I mean, the first key is always, what can we grow here and what can we do well here in the microclimates and the soils and all that we have. But the question is always going to come up in terms of vinifera versus hybrids. Because in so many ways, often people look at the hybrids and say, okay, this isn't a serious wine producing region. But we've seen, you look at Nova Scotia, for example, I think Nova Scotia's done a really good job with utilizing hybrids along with vinifera and are making really good wine. There's areas in BC that are doing that, there's areas in Ontario that are doing that. So I think because this region is still so young, they probably don't have the experiences yet in terms of experimenting and really figuring out, if we're going to grow vinifera, what can we do? And is there pockets there that, you know, will allow vinifera to grow and ripen, but also in terms of winter kill. I mean, how cold does it get in the area? I mean, you look at Prince Edward County, for example. I mean, for the longest time, people were thinking, no, this area you can't grow vinifera here, but you know, they've shown that they can, and they hill up in the wintertime. Again, around Kamloops, Bravado lost 70% of their Pinot Noir last winter to winter kill. And so now they're looking at, okay, do we hill up? Do we use thermal blankets in order to protect the vines? But it's been shown that they can grow great Pinot Noir on their site. As a region evolves, you learn more about that area. You learn, okay, even if you can, during the growing season, grow vinifera, how are we going to protect this if the weather gets really cold in the wintertime?
A lot of the Quebec wineries, from what we've seen, are actually using thermal blankets, and some are hilling up. But again, there's not a lot of vinifera being planted.
If they can, in whatever way they can, learn from what's gone on in Ontario, what's gone on in British Columbia, in the various regions, what's gone on in Nova Scotia, if they can learn what's occurred in those areas and other cool, cold climate areas around the world, and then take that knowledge back and apply it specifically to their own sites, then perhaps they can shorten the learning curve.
This is an interesting wine just because of the producer. Lot Bayard is if not the first Quebecois winery, it's definitely the one that most people think of when they're thinking about Quebecois wine. They're not new to the game. This is going to be actually quite interesting.
They know what they're doing. Again, there's an elegance to it in terms of the texture, in terms of the tannin, in terms of the juiciness. It's fairly well balanced. It does have the little bit of that gamey nose and a little bit on the palate as well, but it's been very well managed. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some oak in these wines, because the tannins are very well managed. But one of the other things that I think it's important to recognize is that when we talk about freshness, I mean, Canada is a cool climate wine producing region. We are able to do something that most areas in the world are not able to do naturally, and that's have a natural acidity in our wines. And that is so important because that's what enhances that freshness. And now we're starting to see wineries that actually embrace acidity, and we're starting to see the consumer really embrace acidity. And it's not something that producers are trying to cover up anymore, or dumb down, or mask in any way. And so I think if the producers in Quebec can take one thing in terms of the freshness, is learn where the direction is going in the rest of the country in terms of acidity, and don't be afraid of it. In fact, highlight it, because that's ultimately what lifts your wines up. When a wine is drinkable, fresh, and drinkability comes from that acidity, and that's a positive thing in the wines, particularly when the wines are meant to be, I think, young and fresh and essentially drinkable now. I mean, these are not wines that you're going to age for 8 years and put down your cellar. These are wines that you want people to drink right now, and so that freshness is really important. Quebec is more European than most other areas in Canada, and so when we talk about food and wine together, it's just a natural thing, and that acidity just enhances the affinity with food. And I think that's a very important thing. You want people to drink your wines with food.
Clean all the white shades in my brain. Before they make me blind, I try to track the fear inside.